sharing my screen. Yeah, so let me start. As we see yesterday for JDBC, right, in Spring Boot, to use JDBC, just we added one dependency and some data source configurations. Rather than we creating a data source using connection parameters and creating JDBC template, whichever dependencies we added, that dependencies doing that for us. When we add Spring JDBC, Spring Boot to JDBC dependency, it is creating JDBC template. The data source properties are creating connection pool. Default Hikari connection pool it is creating with one connection. If you want to change that, you can configure that connection pool properties also, right? It will create as many as you want. Or else if you want to customize, you can create beans. You can simply create beans in your configuration class and you can auto wire them wherever you want and you can do it. Instead, you can use defaults ones. Okay. Now coming to data JPA, same to this, right? Similar to this. When we created Hibernate application, we created one Hibernate session factory object. Session factory is the main connection pool object for Hibernate. Okay. So here it will get connections. Using connections only, we do deal with database operations. Connections are nothing but sessions here. So using each session, we can able to do CRUD operations. So as part of DAO, we need session factory. During implementation of your DAO, you need a session factory object. From session factory, each method can get a session. Each method can get a session here. Each CRUD operation method, anything it is. Using this session, we deal CRUD operations. So for creating session factory, we see multiple approaches there. With Hibernate configuration file, we can create. With the Spring XML file itself, we created it using annotation session factory bean or local session factory bean, right? If you are using annotations, mostly nowadays we use annotations. So to create the session factory in Spring, we used annotation session factory bean class. Annotation session factory bean. This factory bean class we have created using @bean, or else you can configure it in XML also, any approach. So annotation session factory bean will be created by using few properties. We supply properties there, right? We configure Hibernate properties along with our connection pool object, data source object. Correct. That's what we did, right? Using annotation session factory bean, we created session factory and we auto-write it. So while using annotations, we used annotation session factory bean class. and that we auto-wire. Auto-wiring means this annotation session factory bean itself will deliver a session factory. When you imagine a factory bean class, right? Factory bean will produce always the required object. We saw, right? Annotation session factory bean dot init method we called. Without init method it failed, if you guys remember. After property set method we called, then we called get object method inside this get bean at the red bean method. Then it produced a session factory object. That session factory object we utilized for auto wiring. So basically when you auto wire it, right, this session factory will be delivered by annotation session factory bean when you auto wire in your class. But you need not to do all this stuff here. While using the data JPA, you need not to do all this. It will create for you the session factory and the sessions and the class itself, everything. We will see what it will provide by default when you add them. Basically, we add data source properties. Data source properties we configure. Along with the data source properties, we add one dependency, Spring Data JPA. Spring Data JPA when we add, Spring Data JPA when we add, it will create a session factory. No, Hibernate we discussed. Do you guys remember? No. Data JPA we will use directly. Otherwise, same example we are going to reiterate here. Okay, just try to compare this with your data Hibernate example. Okay, so that you would able to understand easily. Okay, yeah, not required actually. If you want, you can do that, right? Again, why should you have a template? Simply, you can create a bean and you can automate it. I mean, what I'm saying, you try it. Okay, already we did that. Simple connection pool object will be available, and session factory also. I think it will be available. You might try session factory directly auto wiring it. If session factory is available, try Hibernate template just by getting insert into it. Okay. So when we add Spring Data JPA, it will create session factory. Not only creating session factory, Spring Data JPA will be using repository pattern here. How it will work? You need not to do anything. When we have CRUD operations, right? When you want to use this data JPA part here, as a developer, what you need to do, you have to create your database equivalent POJOs. Let's say if you have table here, student, create a POJO class for it. As you know how to do it in Hibernate, create a student entity and map this to your table. Map to student table, and mandatorily a table should have a primary key or composite primary key. Primary key is mandatory. Okay, one column or more than one column primary keys you can have. So private int, let's say if you have id column there, use id, put at the rate id. It is mandatory, one column at least. More than one column if you have, that is fine, but at least one column as a primary key it will recommend. Without primary key we can't connect them. If you want to connect, you need to use something database inbuilt row id concept to do that. Otherwise it is mandatory. Okay, generally without primary key creating table is a bad practice. In very rare scenarios people used to create it. If that is the case, we need to use, in Oracle we have row ID concept. I'm not aware of other databases. Will they support or not? But remember, primary key is mandatory. So now this is how you will be mapping your entity to database table. Where it is? Yeah. So every time for your a table, you need to create a entity. Thereafter, right, you have use case. You have all the CRUD operations for that entity. So you will be having UI. UI team will be taken care. From there, they will send create operation, update, delete, select. Just a minute. And we will implement a controller. For the same operations, we will put all the post, put, delete. Okay, get methods here. Once you get the request into controller, you may forward it to service. So as soon as you get it into service, service also will have your methods like create method or update, delete, select. Hereafter, you need to write DAO class. Basically in JDBC or Hibernate, we used to write all the CRUD operations using Hibernate template or Session Factory or JDBC template or simple JDBC. Using any style, we used to implement DAO classes before. Here we implemented DAO class with all CRUD methods. With all CRUD operation methods, we used to create them. Save, update, delete, select, with lot of code. Now in data JPA, what we need to do is you have to create a repository class, DAO class, not exactly class, interface. A interface you need to create. Interface something student repository. Usually interfaces will not have any implementations. If at all you write, you can write default methods or you can put abstract methods, fully abstract methods. You can create a repository. You can create a simple repository by extending from simple interface and extend this interface from JPA repository. JPA repository is another interface. You just need to implement, not implementing, just you need to create your repository class just by extending from JPA repository. Both are interfaces only. Interface can extend another interface, like a class can extend another class. So here you need to pass two arguments. Here you need to pass two arguments. Okay, in this class, code is nothing, zero code. You need not implement anything. Here you need to pass two arguments. One is for which bean you are writing this repository class. Okay, one repository class for one bean, one particular bean. Let's say you have student table. For student table you want CRUD operations. Let's create one repository. Pass your student bean here. Pass your student bean here. Enter your student bean here. And inside the student bean, either you should have a primary key or composite primary key. As I said, you should have a primary key or a composite primary key. A primary key or a composite primary key you can have. That primary key or composite primary key data type you should mention here. If it is int, you need to put integer here. If it is long, you can put long here. If it is composite type, that composite class name you should put here. Composite class name you should put here. Composite class name you should put here. As of now, we have simple integer. You can mention that integer. Yeah, that's it. That is composite. That is what I'm saying. Composite ID. No, composite. A separate class you should create altogether. Okay. Yeah. So consider this as a DAO class. And what about my CRUD operations? Where should I write? Nothing to write. No code. So it is saying no code. No code. You need not to write anything until unless you need customizations. You need not to write anything. At runtime, at runtime for this class, at runtime for this repository, a default repository class will be implemented by Spring. Generally, with interface we can't do anything. Interfaces with interfaces we can't do anything because interfaces will not have never have any implementations. Even if you go to data JPO, also no implementation there. But without implementation, we can't deal with CRUD operations. Here I have a table. I want to do save, update, delete on the table. I'm getting request from UI. So where should I put that data? On table only. To put that data on table, I want database connection and CRUD operations. So for you, what it will do, at runtime, it will provide a implementation. For this class, it will provide one JPA repository default implementation. That implementation will help you to do or to deal with your table. Okay, default implementation. How I can use that default implementation here? I need not to worry about implementation. In my service class, just I need to auto wire iStudent interface, iStudent repo. Just you can auto wire your interface here. What will happen if I auto-wire interface here? Implementation object. Whenever you auto-wire any interfaces, right? Spring will find out is there any implementation available for this or not. So there is default implementation. It will provide for your repo like a proxy object. If you remember AOP, the proxies will generate at runtime for us. So similar way, a proxy will be generated for the student repo with the default CRUD operations. So when you use Hibernate, if you deal with employee table or student table, some address table, while doing CRUD operations, you feel that okay, these all operations looks like same, just object only I'm changing. While saving, you may pass student object or employee object or address object. Even for select operations also, just your entity will change. Apart from that, CRUD operations will be same. So they thought the same. Why, as a developer, he should write all these CRUD operations repeatedly again and again? If I have implement a repository pattern, if I implement a runtime repository for a particular entity, that must be sufficient for all the CRUD operations. Based on your entity you have given, for that entity it will generate CRUD operations. Okay. So if you pass student entity, student CRUD operations, employee CRUD operations, address CRUD operations, which means for any table you can write a simple repository interface, with your entity class, and implementation you need not to worry. Spring will provide implementation and you just auto wire whatever interface you have created into your service classes. But from here you can call all the default methods which is given. By default it will provide save, update, delete, find all methods. Okay, let's check it how it will work. Let me open STS. Not loaded. Yeah, let me create a simple Spring Boot project. Add Spring Data JPA dependency. Let me name it JPA. Next. So you need to add the database driver to which database you want to connect, and add data JPA dependency and Spring Web for controller to connect with Oracle database. Without a driver, you can't connect with any database. Okay. If it is Oracle, Oracle driver, MySQL, MySQL driver. You need a driver class. Yeah. Yeah, Java 8. Is it? If it not working, it won't allow you to choose. It will not allow you, right? Huh. If it is compatible, then only it will allow. No, otherwise STS also will not allow. No? Where you are saying it is not supporting from initializer. Okay, we'll see that. No, then they should not allow. If that is the case. Java Maven 3.2, 3.14, right? 14. Yeah, they're allowing it here. Yeah, yeah, we will see. Yeah, if it troubles, we'll see. Yeah. So data JPA project created with the JPA dependency, and let's add the basic properties, right? Data source, and so we need data source URL, username, password, and this one we can add to create tables automatically. Excuse me. So apart from that, nothing mandatory. Let's see. Data JPA. No, by default, as I said, right? Size you can mention if you want to customize. You can mention it when you want to put the maximum size. Default one. Now here it is using pooled data source. So if it is Hikari, Hikari connections we can put. Data source type a pooled data source UPC implementation. I think it is Arcil implementation. Yeah, let me try. Okay, I don't want to put this. Okay, so just mentioning my connection properties with the simple JPA HBM to DDL auto, mentioning create us. Okay, now let's start with your entity here first. Okay, create a package com dot rbu dot app dot model. You can create model or entity with any name. Okay, create your class here, student. Okay, just created with simple dependency spring data JPA and your connection type. Okay, Arcil we are using, so Arcilate it is adding with the data JPA. Now create entity at the rate entity. Yeah, so all these JPA annotations moved to, earlier it used to be from JPA package. Now all these are shifted to Jakarta package. Okay, Jakarta dot persistence. Okay, at the rate table. You can mention your table name here. Database username system. Private int ID. Private string name. String email. So as many you want. No, let's do it the primary key now first. Why we need to. Yeah. Now put your required at the rate data getters and setters. So Lombok I should have added here. Let me add it. Go to Spring dependencies. In case if you miss any starter, right? Again, you can go to Spring, add starters. You can bring on new starters here. If anything, if you forget. So you can add here Lombok. Use at the rate data for setters and getters. Bus. I'm not sure ID level. Usually we should add anything to the project. For ID, we install it to support. Let it finish. So it stuck here. Okay, actually it is not saved. It's okay. If I do save again, for simple plugin it is taking long time. Okay, don't save. Oh my god. If it's stuck here, huh? Do you know? Yeah, it is taking a lot of time. Don't save. 嗯 We need to wait until it finishes. Or let me restart it. Meanwhile, let me open another window. Okay, I'll show you existing applications. Okay, so let me show you this end-to-end CRUD operation how implemented here. This is yeah, CRUD JPA. Showing, yeah. So here you see we created one entity student map to table, student ds table, and this is the schema, and created one ID with integer and auto generated value with the getters and setters. And for that one we need to create a repository, student repo, student repository, no implementation required, just implement your repository. I mean, this is also interface, right? Extend from another interface called JPA repository. Bus. These all are custom methods. Again, I return find by ID. By default it will provide. Apart from find by ID, if you want custom methods, you can write them here with the same property name. Find after by your property name, email, name, address, and pass asterisk that as a input here. So how it will work is select the star from student table where email is equal to email, it will apply when you write like this. In case if you want to join multiple columns here in uncondition, you can write that one as well. Find by name and email combination. If you want, you can write like this. So this is something like JPQL. You follow this convention to write them. Find by is like a where condition. Yeah, no, two parameters, name and email. In the same order you need to pass. This is like a where condition, where name is equal to this one and email is equal to this one. During runtime it will provide that implementation as well. And obviously if it is resulting one single row, that row you will get here. Okay. Yeah, sure. Let me finish it. Okay. So as soon as you created them, you can auto wire it into your service class. I have a service class here. Actually cache is enabled. Let me disable cache. Okay. Now here is my service class. Into the service class I auto wired my interface. And here I have create method. I'm getting input from front end student object, calling my repository dot save method. I haven't implemented it, but you can see you got implementation. So this is the default implementation that we'll use, CRUD repository class. There will be one class CRUD repository. It will use that CRUD repository implementations. So if I click on implementations, for this CRUD repository, one implementation it will be provided. Maybe you can print it. You can say the repository implementation class. So using default implementations, we are doing save. Even for update also you can use save. It will do both. If primary key is available, it will do update. If not available, it will do save. So on first request, we are saving it. On the next request also, if you send same object with same primary key, then it will update your remaining data, whatever you want to update. And delete, just as usual, delete method. To get multiple objects, find all, default method. And find by name, find by email, find by address, we have written, right? The same methods you can call. And find by name and find student by name and email we have. So you may get name and email from controller and you can pass. No, here update will do save as well. If that record is not available, it will save it. It will create, yeah. But without object, how you will trigger this? Usually from front end on update scenario only you will be triggering it. Intentionally, if you call from Postman, yeah, it will update instead of update, it will create it for you. Okay. Now service I am calling from controller here. So from controller, whenever I get post mapping student URL with the request body student data, I'm just passing the student object here into service. So it will make a call to database and it will save it. Finally, it will result your object, the same object we are sending it back to the front end because it will generate ID as well, right? That ID along with ID will get the same object. That same object we will return so that the front end will get to know that what is the ID created with the HTTP status created. Same thing for update, we are using put mapping, sending same student object, and before calling update method, just checking find student by name is here there or not, or find student by ID. You can get it. If not there, here we are somehow controlling it. If record itself not available, saying user not found. So if condition if it is not there, then it will go and insert. So throwing a exception saying user not found. If user not if user available, then calling update method. For your question, you can see controller on controller level we are restricting it. We are not allowing if the user record is not already available. And finally, the updated record we are putting and sending HTTP status OK, which means 200. First, doing select operation in update. What select will do? If record available, then only it will give result. Correct? Find student by name. Let's say Prakash. For Prakash, I did update call and his record is not available. When I call find student by name Prakash, it will return which object? Null object, because that object is not there. Then what I am doing? Throwing exception. Custom exception. This is a simple exception class. Custom exception class throwing message. User not found message. Okay. If record available, if record is available, then updating it, making actual update call. Same thing in delete also you can apply. Before delete itself, you may verify it whether the record is there or not, and you can call delete call. Okay, and get call to get all the students, getting all the students and returning it. Okay, for simple single record using find student by name and returning it. Yeah, find by name we have, find by email, find by address. Same input getting from the user as a path variable and giving that input to the service. Service usually it will return this object, student object. I'm wrapping my response with the student object and HTTP status. The same thing doing here and here. Coming to configurations, here we have HBM to DDL update. If table not available, it will create it. When we use cache, we will enable it. Okay, so cache I'm not going to use. Yeah, now we have here the port number, HBM to DDL update. If table not available, it will recreate. If available, it will just keep it as it is. If columns alters required, it will do. And the URL, username, password, and your driver class name. Bus. Yeah. Coming to dependencies, yeah, which is using 2.7 with 1.8 with data JPA. Okay. Yes, of course. Without a driver, we can't connect. By default, yeah. By default, if they provide, generally they don't provide. Okay, that's your responsibility. Which database you want to use, that database driver you should put here. So based on the driver which you have given in the class path here, right? It will treat like a class path driver. So the same driver class name we are mentioning here, saying Archil driver. Please load Archil driver during connection pool creation. So it will create by using this class only. While finding this class, if this class is not available in your form, it will not load it because that is not available in the class path. Okay. So simple. Yeah. Hmm. com.mysql driver we put here. MySQL URL, MySQL username, password. Quickly, I'll show you three examples I have. Let me run them. I created for one is for Archil, one for MySQL, one for DB2 as well. Let's save it. So where it is, data JPA 2. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, one more configuration once after creation of all your classes, right? One thing you should not miss, that is right, in your application class, Spring Boot application we configure here, right? So component scan, if all classes are belongs to same package, it's okay because they are outside the package. So I kept com.ds, so it will scan all the child packages. And you need to use these two annotations compulsory. One is enable JPA repositories. Where do you have your repository classes, right? Wherever you have your repository interfaces. So my application is having multiple tables. For that multiple tables, multiple bean classes I can have here. For all that beans, I can have repository classes here. So my beans package, wherever I have my Hibernate entities, wherever I have repository interfaces, that two paths I need to configure here. Enable JPA repositories. Where do you have your repository interface? It is there inside com.ds.repo. Where do you have your entities? It is inside com.ds.beans. If you don't mention it, it will not able to find it out. By default, it will not scan them. Not in the same bash package. Your application class is inside com.ds.demo. All other packages are not. Usually, we will maintain inside. You're talking about this base package, right? Yeah. So it is a different package. That's why call. Of course, if they are in both same package also, still you need to scan them. Still you need to scan your repositories and entities. Okay. Sub packages, it means com.ds.star. Anything inside ds. All. Everything is covered apart from repositories and entities. You should explicitly call them. While you mentioning them, they are not classes. Whatever you have here, it is not a class, it is an interface. Usually it will skip it as it is an interface. And here you have a simple poso class. This is an entity, not your stereotype bean, a simple entity. So it needs, right? Generally, forget about data JPA. During our simple Hibernate, what we did, we have configured all that configurations via XML file or in the configuration class, right? While creating auto annotation session factory bean, we have supplied all the properties here. If you remember, in Hibernate properties, we have given, right, dialect information, connection pool size. Of course, connection pools we passed via data source, HVM to DDL property we given, and where you have your bean classes. That bean classes input also we have given annotated classes. If it is XML file based configuration, mapping classes, something we give input, right, as a Hibernate property. So the same thing we are doing here for application. We are saying here we have the beans and these are the repositories classes. So for this repositories classes, it need to provide implementation, and during that implementations, it need to use these entities for auto DDL or to map to your table or to generate a repository class. This entity also required. So explicitly we should mention them. You can mention them inside, yeah, Spring Boot application class. Obviously, yes. Your container only responsible for all the classes. Whichever you classes implement in Spring Boot, for all classes, your IOC is responsible to create them or to manage them. IOC is the single point of contact for all the objects. IOC only will create them. Okay. Now, correct. Just not because they are specially, designed for repositories. So you need to scan them. You need to mention it. Then only it can recognize them as a entities. As you have so many packages, so many classes, it cannot go and find it whether it is entity or not, whether it is repository or not, right? Maybe they could have done that. They can easily identify it, but they need to scan lot of classes before application start itself, right? Lot of configurations need to be executed. If tables not available, table should have created using HBM to DDL property. So upfront they should have done all this, right? Entity scanning and repositories creation, they should done before the other classes creation itself. Maybe that is the reason they are asking to mention it here. Okay, yeah, we'll see that. Now, yeah, properties also we saw here. Yeah, simple properties. Run it. Go to main class and run it. Maybe check inside configuration class. Nowhere it configured the bean and repository scanning. Yeah, you may check it later. Yeah, yeah, yes. Please verify in other classes. Maybe configuration class, config classes. There will be some at the rate configuration classes. Verify them. Not a main method class, maybe configuration class. So application getting started. on 9090. Okay, and let me see, just a minute, let me see. In form file I must have added cache not using actuator, we added dev tools, lombok. Okay, cool. Now you can call your methods. Maybe you can use postman and call each method. As it is a REST controller, right? I can make calls from there. 9090/student, and which inputs I need to pass. ID not required. Name, email, address I should pass. Student body ID not required. Just give name, email, address. Name, email, address. Yeah. Let's run it. Send it. Request has been submitted. 201 created, and we got a response back with ID. And if I insert one more record, okay, cool. We'll try that. Now insert a second record. It got inserted, and we got response to auto-generated ID. Okay. Maybe the same records you may update and verify it also. So during update, we need to pass entity as well. Let's say want to update address, something Delhi I want to put, and from post to put. We have put method with the same URL, right? Controller class, put mapping with same URL. Just method type is changing, put method. So I'm trying to updating this. So during update, right, generally from front end, they'll pass as it is the previous data with the updated data, right? Single field update never happen. All the fields they send from front end to back end again. Then we will pass same object. If at all updates required, it will update, or else it will keep it into the save. So update is called. So it will verify whether this record is there or not. If there, then it will update. So now record got updated. So if I pass with some wrong name, so by name we are verifying it, right? Something ABC I'll send. I'll be getting bad request. Invalid user data given. Okay. Maybe you may verify with ID. Primary key is as mandatory always. So verify with primary key, not with the name. Maybe name, if name want to update, they can update, or email also they can update. Okay. So I think it is working fine. If you want to verify, you can verify database also. So this is the table and student DS table. Oracle. Yeah, the two records got affected into table. Okay, so I'll share this example. You can try. Maybe, yeah, as you are asking to comment them. So now application is getting restarted. So it is getting failed, saying student repository not available. It is unable to create repo. Yeah, which version you are using? Maybe you try this example also. See that version compatibility. If not here, did you configure somewhere in the properties? That also you can verify. Okay, did you configure something here? There will be lot of provisions in Spring Boot, right? Yeah. But somewhere they should have done. I created the latest project only. Even I am using in my migration project as well. Without entity scan may work, but somewhere you have done the configurations that you can verify. Okay. Even working also not a bad scenario, right? So now, yeah. So the same example, right? I have in MySQL and MongoDB also. Yeah, tomorrow we will see that. Okay, I'll show you tomorrow. Uh, okay. Yeah, I created. Yes, I should share. Just a minute. Be online. I will share you all the examples. Let me create a repository. Just a minute. Here itself I'll upload all other examples. Okay, so you can download them. I'm sharing this path. Okay, just click on this zip file. It will give you download option. Download it. Other previous examples also I'll keep it in the same path. You have few examples there, but those are old examples, right? So ongoing examples I'll keep it here. Okay, I shared it. Yeah, yeah, see you.